Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting People's HR webinar. And today we're diving into the world of AI, specifically as to how it can supercharge your HR department. So buckle up because we've got some interesting things lined up and hope it'll be a little fun. So before we jump in, let's give a warm welcome to our speaker, Maheshi Gamage. Maheshi is the Assistant Vice President of Human Resources at Nations Trust Bank PLC and a total HR rockstar with immense HR experience playing HR in multinational organizations. But the best part is that she's also a total HR tech enthusiast just like us. So Maheshi, the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Thuria. It's indeed a privilege to be part of this program. And as always, as you said, like I'm willing to, sort of share my knowledge. I'm not a pro in this, but it's definitely, kind of very, as you correctly said, very enthusiastic, sort of and inquisitive to learn and, sort of take the journey forward. So hello, everyone. Good. From my time, it's a good afternoon. I do not know from wherever you are joining. So good afternoon to all of you, or good morning, or good evening. Yeah. Just starting off, so generative AI and AI has taken over the world by storm, and it is definitely sort of has changed how we do a lot of things, not just by HR per se, but how we do business. The entire landscape of business has basically changed, right? So most of y'all are also must be very familiar with ChatGPT, which has kind of been the buzzword few sort of couple of months back, and now it is kind of part and parcel of our life. So the whole idea of this session with the collaboration with any team is to people's HR team is to basically ensure that we touch upon some of the basics. If you haven't really started the journey yet or been very inquisitive about it, then maybe just to tickle your thought process a little bit and to give you the background as to how you can kickstart and what wonders you can actually do and how HR can really use AI and especially generative AI and the tools which is available to kind of streamline our work, change the landscape that we operate, and save a little bit of more time and spend a little bit of time with our employees, which AI can't do. And we will replace that time frame and connect with them as humans and support them in their journey in terms of development. So to begin with, let's get into a little bit of, just give me a minute. So you might have to excuse me once in a while because since I'm at work, I might get certain calls from work as well. So you might have to excuse me a little bit. Okay, seems to be having a small issue with my slide. Just give me a minute. All right, I'm back. Yes, technology, certain things cannot be replaced. So when you look at generative AI, how much it can help, it has basically made an impact. If you look at some of the research companies that has done global research to sort of see how it is going to have an impact into the world of HR, it basically states that 70% of leaders have identified that if we do not adopt to this technology pretty soon, it's not going to take years and years, but if we do not adopt to this pretty soon, it's going to we're going to be really, really behind, many steps behind in terms of how the business world is kind of moving. So if you look at the context of HR professionals, yes, we need to partner with business, and that's the kind of landscape, because now we are not an administrative function, we are more of a business partner. right? So if we need to partner with our business stakeholders and with our businesses, obviously we need to kind of use this data and information to sort of see how we make a change in our HR processes. I seems to be having a small problem. You have to just excuse me a bit. Okay, I seems to be having a small problem the moment I kind of put my cam on. So maybe I'll try to kind of keep my cam off and kind of go through this. So generative AI, what it basically means is, in simple terms, is basically using data, right? It's a conversational mode, and it's basically like talking to another colleague. So we use basically a computer system to interact and give out our requirements, and then it basically responds back to you as a colleague. So how it basically, sort of worked is basically using large language models, and ChatGPT, if you look at it, is one of the most used sort of AI that is available for us to use on our day-to-day basis. So moving on from that, so what are AI prompts? So let's look at it from a point of a conversation. If you go to a coffee shop and you really want to get the best coffee according to your requirements and according to your taste, according to your flavors that you are most interested in, then you need to give more specific details to the one who's basic to the barista, right? So then what you need to basically do is giving this information, be concise, and you need to give your requirement. So just as the same way that you are having a conversation with someone. Now, HR professionals, that's what we do most of the time, having conversations with people. So when we do that, if you want to have a very focused, outcome-driven conversation, it is important that we basically be very concise, direct the questions in the right way, so that we get better outcome from the other party who basically in conversation with us. So AI prompts are also like that. As I said initially, ChatGPT or any tool that you use, it basically is a conversation. So we need to be telling the system what we really want, right? So throughout the session, we are going to kind of look at various ways how we can use AI prompts and get a better result that helps our journey and in terms of our day-to-day administrative functions that we perform. Okay, so some of the tools that is commonly widely available is basically ChatGPT. I'm sure most of you all have basically used ChatGPT, which basically, sort of has changed our lifestyles in everything that we do. And Gemini being co-pilot. So the organization I work is basically heavy on Microsoft products. So yes, Copilot is one of the things that we basically use. Not to an extent, we are testing certain stuff. So I will be able to kind of share some insights from that as well. Okay, so as we said, it is not easy to kind of just type in something and expect a result out of it. So we basically need to be very specific about what we say to our AI tool. And we also need to kind of not just mumbler, but be very specific and be a prompter, so that if you are somebody who is kind of prompting the right questions, it will give you the best solutions and the best answers. Okay, so let's look at how do you craft a proper AI prompt. So very simply, it requires a context. And the task in terms of what do you like to kind of get out of this instruction that you give it to the system, as well as the instruction has to be very clear and not lengthy, and it has to give the right cues. And in terms of clarity and refinement is something that you can do based on the answers we get. But in terms of clarity is what you basically ask the system, okay, are you very clear about the requirement, right? So we will look at an example just to get our head around as to how do you work things out. So in terms of writing an AI prompt. So this is a typical thing that we kind of, because as you know, we recruiters as HR professionals use quite a lot of job descriptions in terms of CVs and, sort of a lot of work that we do in and around talent acquisition space. Now, in this process, how do we kind of use AI, generative AI to kind of support? So let's go to ChatGPT for an example. If you're giving a prompt, if you're giving a question out, as we said before, you need to give what kind of a company that you work for, maybe in terms of the scale and the size of the organization, and what is it that you really want ChatGPT to do, as well as in terms of the outcome that you're looking for. And then you can also ask, do you understand this requirement? Because we need to remember, this is not a Google search, right? Because we are kind of little used to do this kind of, sort of giving prompts to Google as well. But the difference over here is it's a conversational AI. So it will understand, it will talk to you, it will talk to you based on the kind of prompts that you give. So this is kind of an example in terms of how we can use an AI prompt for recruitment purposes. I will also share and show you a comparison that I have done a little later towards the session, actually how it is basically being used personally by me in our recruitment space, when we do things on day-to-day basis. Okay, so as moving on to recruitment and talent acquisition space, how generative AI can really help us. It can help us is because it can give you very interesting job descriptions. Now, why I say very interesting job descriptions is because if you go back to many years and how we have kind of really, sort of got ourselves used to look at word-based, job descriptions, which are very lengthy and, which has very, sort of not so friendly words as well, because it sounds very official and, sort of with that kind of boring, I would say, kind of job descriptions. We can move into use generative AI and, a tool like ChatGPT to kind of create very interesting job descriptions. For an example, you can give a prompt to kind of give a prompt in a manner where, you can say, to be appealing to Gen Zs, for an example, because some of us, when we draft job descriptions, it might, as I said, it has a very, sort of formal language, might not be really appealing to the new age generation. So then how do you make it compelling, interesting for them? So then, yes, you can write a prompt, for an example, saying, can you write a job description for the position of software engineer, make it more fun and, sort of using the words more fun and appealing. So it will give you sort of a job description, which basically, which is more easy on language, more relaxed, and which will be more appealing to your candidates, even if you want to kind of create a job, use it for advertisement purposes, right? It also gives a lot of insights in terms of creating interview questions. Now, as most of us are not experts sometimes when it comes to certain areas of business, right? Now, yes, we don't have to worry because we can learn in terms of, let's take a technical area. Sometimes some HR people are not very familiar about latest technology which is available if you have to hire somebody in the space of software engineering. Yes, sometimes we may come across latest technology in the CVs, and we might wonder, what is this language, or what is this, it's not making any sense to me. Then yes, we can use this to kind of sort of understand. One way to understand more about latest technology, what's the background. You do not really have to, sort of be too technical about things, but you can learn in a simple way. That's number one. And also, even if we have to do a bit of a comparison, I do not know, maybe some of you all have certain experiences where you have to go to the business because sometimes certain technicalities we might not understand, and we need to heavily depend on the business, which takes our time, which also takes the business time. Now, using a tool like ChatGPT or even Copilot, you can kind of use the comparators. You can compare CVs with a job description, and it'll kind of give you a summary in terms of the candidate's profile, right? Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's something like everybody is an expert in the area that they are in now. So it is basically also kind of looking at that. You can also ask, okay, can you give me 5 questions to kind of ask these candidates based on the candidate's CV and the background. So to this extent, it can be personalized, and you can basically learn. While you learn, also you can kind of save your time in terms of your research, in terms of the time, and in terms of shortlisting, the administrative tasks that you have to spend on. It also, when it comes to onboarding experiences, it's heavily can be used to customize different candidates' needs. Chatbots that basically uses data and generative AI can speak to multiple candidates at the same time, automating the workflows, where if we can ask certain specific questions from the candidates and get a personalized understanding, and basically customize their onboarding process. Now, I'm sure this is not something which we have been very, very used to, or it's kind of a new thing. Okay, how do we, is it possible even to personalize onboarding experiences? Yes, because generative AI is here, we are now in a position to do that. Yes, so there are many more benefits that basically comes from recruitment and talent acquisition space. I think that is a major area where generative AI can really transform your organization as well as the work that you do. I will, as I said, I will show you a comparison that I've done, so that it will kind of be more practical for you to kind of see as to how it is being done. So moving on very quickly. So this is an example prompt in terms of how around a prompt basically about questions, getting to know about what are the type of questions that we can ask, interview questions to ask from a candidate, right? And this is the answer that basically ChatGPT has given, just for you to get an example and an idea about. The question is basically for a marketing intern. So what kind of questions should be asking a marketing intern who's basically sort of applying to your organization, and it will throw you various types of questions like this, similar to this, basically that you can ask and structure your interview process so that you get a better feel in terms of the answers that the candidate gives and do a better assessment. Okay, let's also look at career development. Is that something which is easy to kind of, can we incorporate generative AI to career development? Indeed, it can. So just to share an example of something that I've tried recently is to basically, going through appraisal process. Sometimes you come across gaps in terms of performance. So if you have a staff member who's having certain amount of poor performance, or sort of gap in their performance, we can basically provide a job description details, and then also a background of a summary of the candidate's profile or the staff member's profile, and basically give us a career development plan. And these are the strengths of X, Y, Z. We just have to be very specific and mark, say, for example, in terms of technical skills, these are the positives, these are the, few negatives in terms of, or or development areas that is required. And we can even prompt it to sort of ask, can you please give me a development plan for this staff member? And then it will point out as to how you can kind of work out a development plan. Even it can be, there are tools which are available to even, which is extended to career coaching. Right now, this is something definitely people can get a little skeptical about it, just to not being very sure, okay, is that even possible? But yes, AI can basically take, analyze data, as well as there are tools available where you can lead employee to have a conversation, in a very informal setup, to kind of where they can seek certain advices in terms of handling situations sometimes. Writing a prompt saying, okay, I'm having a difficult day with a customer who is, not supportive. Tell me 3 ways how I can handle this customer. Right, it will then give you certain steps, ideas, and you can keep refining until you find the prompt, until you find a solution that basically meets your requirements. So that's the other thing. I think it's very important to sort of understand the AI prompts basically lets you to find the solution until you feel that you're satisfied with the outcome. So that is how I basically see like the difference between the, Google search, or, if you're trying Google search for a lot of things, it's basically you have to go through many websites and to kind of, really find, and you might not really find your solution in just one place. But through a conversational AI, it is important, and it is very easy and convenient for you to kind of create your prompts in a manner where you can kind of really get the answers until according to your satisfaction. So that's something which is, again, personalized requirement for us. Yes. So in terms of as a prompt, which is basically can be used for career development, if we kind of go back, so we can kind of give a sort of background, as we looked at in the example, saying we need to provide a context. So what is the context? You can say I'm an HR professional and I have staff named XYZ, or in this case is the staff member's name we have taken as Joe, who is performing a job role of a salesperson, and also he basically, he likes to be promoted to, say, senior sales manager or sales manager, and I want to create a career development plan. Can you assist? Right. And then basically this is the answer that ChatGPT has basically thrown, which basically gives out the career development plan that is being planned. Right. Okay, so this is just an example. So AI prompts for performance management. AI can be also in similar, prompts, like in the examples. I think when I show some examples in the practical environment, I think that will be much more easier for you to kind of understand. In terms of streamlining reviews to get smart goals, it's very, very, even though we say set smart goals, setting smart goals have not been very easy, right? Constantly HRP, professionals get questioned, how do you set this goal? And even if we go through hundreds of appraisals, we will find smart goals are not very smart, as well as sometimes it is not short, it is not specific, it is not target driven, and it is not so simple as it's supposed to be. And also often people do get confused in terms of how it is measured as well. Now we do not have to worry. We just have to write and give a job description or a requirement, and say, can you set up smart goals for the following job description. And then you give out the job description, and it will list down the set of KPIs and how it is measured as well. So it just takes, sometimes some of this work would have taken about, say, half an hour or a maximum of around an hour for you to kind of set it up. But using generative AI, you can do these tasks in about a couple of seconds. And your outcome, as I mentioned earlier on, will basically be depending on the conversation in terms of the prompt, how you write. So that is what you need to spend time and also try to understand how to write these prompts, because the more prompts you write, more familiar you get. And also the system will understand how your algorithms basically works in terms of your language capabilities, as well as how you kind of really, sort of what is your style. So once when you kind of build that kind of, sort of a rapport, just like you build a rapport with an individual, you will basically be able to get the best insights from that, right? So few areas as mentioned in the slide. So I'm not going to go through every area in the slide because it's quite visible and clear. So we can use various generative AI driven tools to kind of gather employee feedback. I do not know some of whether you all have had performance management systems, which basically helps you can have an AI inbuilt where you can kind of, when writing performance feedback, it helps supervisors to kind of pre-populate the kind of feedback, because otherwise you have to you just put in the feedback, for an example, saying Joe is good at managing clients. Joe is good at with his network skills and with his colleagues. He's a very strong team player. However, his areas of development may need communication skills, improving communication skills, more on sales, say technical knowledge in terms of selling. If you just put these things together, and it'll compile a kind of a feedback prompt for you to kind of, sort of put it into the appraisal. Now imagine you sitting and trying to write a paragraph about Joe's performance. And sometimes this thing would have taken about maybe 50 minutes by minimum, or most of the time. I'm sure some of you all may have come across, when we look at performance appraisals, we hardly see comments, right? It's because sometimes not everybody is very good at writing. Sometimes even though we have an idea in mind, it's little difficult for us to convert it into a nice language where it is basically more user friendly, as well as it is not too offensive to a staff member to read. Why sometimes performance management has become a process where employees are not very comfortable, is because it is not basically taken as constructive feedback. So when we also need to know how to write constructive feedback, right? So we can now use AI to kind of write constructive feedback, which gives taking away the biasness and giving the right feedback to the staff members. So these are some of the ways that we can use AI for performance management. So from like AI prompt point of view, for this example, we have taken in the performance review for Tim, right, who's an entry-level cost accountant. And as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of strengths, he's a good team player, he's a punctual guy, needs improvement in his attention to detail and communicating with his manager. So you put this thing together, and this is the kind of results that you get. Isn't it amazing? So, you do not have to break your head to kind of now understand, sit and write lengthy paragraphs in terms of being more constructive in terms of the feedback. Okay. Legal and regulatory compliance. So we do have quite a lot of legal and regulatory compliance work that we need to do in the space of HR. Now, I will share an example that I kind of tried out recently is to create a risk and control matrix for one of our pay related processes. I'm, sort of, if you all are familiar in terms of a RCM, risk and control matrices, where we ask the question, what can go wrong? My prompt was very simple in terms of saying, can you help me to develop a risk and control matrix for a organization, of course, in terms of the industry that I financial services industry, for a pay subscription payment model. And it basically gave the set of questions and the kind of controls that we can implement in terms of the pay. So the requirement basically to sort of understand, we have a subscription models that we basically reimburse to staff members. And then I wanted to kind of create this risk and control matrix to sort of understand what can go wrong in this process, because it is processed, it's a grade-based limit, and it is given to staff members to apply online, and where, a direct debit basically goes through. So then to cover this process, when I asked that question, it basically gave me what can go wrong. Yes, people can apply for wrong limits. And then if that is the case, how can we put a control to manage that? And in terms of using the system, certain controls that needs to be implemented. So everything was basically given, and I did not have to really sit down and like in the past years where you have to break your, sort of really sit down and kind of think, but you can take that information and refine it, because you are the one who has the experience. So based on your experience, you can kind of really, it's not a copy paste, right? It is to basically take that, save the time, take that information, and you keep building on it, so that it saves time for you to be more strategic in terms of to focus in terms of what you really need to focus. So for compliance purposes, I'm sure we even use, handbooks, policies when we have to create, how to create a flexible work from home policy. Now, most of us have been used to work from home, and or to be even a hybrid work environment, where we have experiences in terms of what can go wrong and what can go right. If you want to address certain components through the new work from home policy or in a hybrid work policy, we can specify the requirements and give it out to kind of create a policy for you. And it will basically, the system will throw out a policy and a guideline that you can work around and constantly start building. Right. So typical example, I think we've taken an employee handbook. This is through Copilot in terms of creating an HR manager. So you need to create a comprehensive employee handbook covering X, Y, Z areas. You can be even more specific so that it will give you the layout per se, right? So these are some of the ways how we can kind of use in terms of AI prompts in the space of HR. And one of the things that we heavily can use is also in the service side. If your organization basically has an HR help desk, where we kind of collect the queries through help desk, where employees put in their regular inquiries or regular requests through. That is what we do at Nations Trust. We have a help desk that where we reach out to, because we have staff spread across in multiple locations. So they reach out to us. It's not humanly possible for us to answer all the calls or be, sort of be available all the time. So we've used this technology platform to get in their requests. Now we kind of, looking at ways how we can kind of, through AI-driven chatbot, to kind of answer some of their questions, and from the time that they raise the query. So that is going to kind of reduce the timeline that we are even using now, and provide them some instant responses. Because right now, yes, the request has to come in, and human has to look at it, a staff member has, a HR member has to look at it and then provide a solution to it. Whereas if it is a simple question, we can use AI to kind of provide through a chatbot to provide instant answers then and there where there is no waiting time. So these are some of the things in terms of service side, managing service, providing a better service to your staff members, improving internal customer service. These are some of the ways how we can use generative AI right now. So moving on. So I know there are a lot of questions that get questioned around this whole concept of AI. How do you, identify people use generative AIs or chatbots to, or even ChatGPT kind of tools to kind of be, copy and do their work? Yes, there are certain ethical issues being. I'm sure there is legislations now being formed in terms of use of AI tools, especially in the space of creative space where where if you kind of reach out to video editor or somebody who's in the space of in the creative art side, can the trademarking in terms of the sort of all that is being questioned, but we need to look at the positives, as I feel, and see how we can use technology to help us, right? So as responsible HR professionals, there are limits, there are certain constraints in this technology. However, we can basically try and minimize it. So one of the issues that we can come across is being biased, is because these are data driven as well as algorithms which is being used on heavy data that is available. So there can be situations in certain backgrounds based on the information that is being sort of used, where there are like certain discriminations for basically color or gender or whatever. But when we write prompts, if we can be a little bit more sensitive, and when you write a prompt and if the answer, when you evaluate it, if you feel there has been a certain amount of biasness, we have the option of refining it, right? So we need to kind of understand the certain limitations that it has. It is not going to replace our jobs, or it's not going to do everything through what we do, but it is to basically use these tools to kind of save the time that you have been spending in terms of sitting down, and that concentrated time that you sometimes probably need to sit down and do is basically can cut into half, right? So we need to understand there can be certain biasness, as I mentioned, in terms of the based on the algorithms that is basically used in the system. However, when we review the answers, we should be able to kind of gauge that and refine our prompts accordingly. In terms of transparency, yes, it is very, very important to be complied with the legal legislations and what we kind of upload into these tools, right? Being HR professionals, we are very much aware that we need to be, maintain confidentiality. That is in our DNA. So we need to remember that. And we need to remember the kind of information that we can put it up there. Say, for an example, if you're looking at a common legislation, which is already in the public domain of information, and you can use that information to give a summary. But at the same time, suppose it's a company policy and you want AI to kind of give you a summarized version of it or whatever, you need to be very well aware of the data privacy, the kind of policy that your organization may have. If some of y'all are familiar about the data classification model, if it is a model that, if it is a document that can be shared between public and with, then yes, you may have that option of kind of using it and sort of to do a summary or whatever the work that you want to do. But otherwise, it is not really recommended for you to use certain confidential information in a public domain. So we as HR professionals needs to be very, very alerted in terms of using the tools, what information we can kind of upload up there, and how do we write our prompts to make sure we can write hypothetical names, hypothetical, sort of information just to get an idea, a framework sometimes. So based on that framework that you receive through the tool, you can build your actual data. So this is something that it's recommended to do, is purely to make sure that we have to maintain transparency between the candidates, especially if you're using it in the space of talent acquisition and recruitment per se. I know there are certain organizations as well as there are certain countries where we have to get the consent in terms of sharing the information. We tell for which purpose that it is being used and in which platforms that is their confidential information being used. And we have to take that consent if it is required, provided your legal background as well as the compliance background in your local environment. So some of the other limitations that we may also come across would be like human oversight. So as I mentioned, this is like a conversation, right? In this conversation, if your personality also plays a role, and your thought process, your attitude, your thinking basically plays a role in this. So when we write prompts, and if we kind of have a little bit of biasness in the way how we write, especially, just I'm using this only as an example, is, the gender. If we write a prompt saying, okay, write a job description for a sales manager, for a male or sales manager or something like that, where the prompting can give you a bit of a biased outcome, right? So human oversight in terms of not giving the right information or prompting to get an outcome that you probably personally may want can kind of dilute the whole context. Yes, there are limitations when it comes to that. So that is why it is very important to kind of write the context in a manner which is very simple, direct, and using task-driven kind of prompts, so that we take away the human, our thought process, our thinking behind, so that the prompting is basically not driven by our purely by our thought process or our thinking per se. Yeah. So I touched a little bit about the data privacy in terms of the practices, in terms of being very ethical use of data that has to be complied, and maintaining confidentiality across is very, very important. As I said, the tools are there for us to use to cut down our non-productive activities that we spend time on, to kind of use these tools to kind of save time. So in the space, but we need to be extra careful in terms of which environment and in which context do we kind of use this information, whether it is hosted internally, whether it's hosted in a public domain. Sometimes we can purchase certain AI tools and integrate it with some of our systems where the data privacy, in terms of protecting data, is kind of being looked at, and the data is not shared in a public domain or into a public space. The algorithms are not being kind of shared in a public space per se. So with these controls around, yes, it is pretty much still possible to use AI, and especially the generative AI, to make our lives easy. Yeah. Maybe before, so Thuriat, before we take this question on, is it possible for me to share my screen in terms of the samples, the practical samples?
Yes,
maybe?
Maheshi. Yes, Maheshi, go ahead.
All right. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is an example that I've kind of tried out. So for, sort of for saving time, I've kind of already given the prompt. So I've given the context, who I am, and the kind of company that this requirement is for, and also my requirement. So my requirement is to basically get some help to identify two CVs in comparison for the position of senior animation designer. I wanted to kind of compare two CVs to kind of understand, which candidate is probably the best. This is prior to a technical evaluation or even before reaching out to the business to sort of get an understanding. Is because, yes, obviously as an HR professional, I am not an expert in terms of identifying who is the best designer whom we can hire. So I just need a little bit of, support to sort of get, before I get to the questioning part of it, or having an interview, to get a bit of an analysis. So this is exactly what I kind of asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT, being very helpful, of course, said happy to help. Yes, so I first given the job description, and then I've basically also given the CV. In terms of the two CVs, I've kind of used the information in terms of these are all hypothetical cases, of course, just to kind of do a comparison and look at the, so given here, right? And so it's a quite lengthy one because I'm giving two, sort of. So this is the comparison that the system basically has given me. So the two candidates, and it has given me this summary in terms of the educational summary, the skill summary, right, as a profile. And this is the second candidate, right? And the most important part is here, comparison summary. So this very briefly kinds of gives you a idea as to, who is basically having strength, what are the strengths in terms of each candidate. And it also, the icing on the cake is basically the recommendation. So it gives you an idea, okay, who is looking based on my requirement. If I'm looking at foundational animation skills based on the role that I'm looking for, yes, Holly will be the candidate whom I can look at. But if I need somebody who is a little bit more into the management and who has to lead a team, yes, Alex will be the candidate to basically move. So this is something, kind of being used just for an example. And also, I think I have another one over here, basically being used for, yes, I think I kind of, so this is I've on a public domain information, something that I used. Yeah. So yes, so what I wanted to do was a public domain information, which is already available, and kind of use it to kind of see, it's a 300-page document, to see whether there's a possibility of summarizing what HR need to focus in that 300-page document. Imagine sitting down and reading through a 300-page, you know, regulation or like a document and trying to figure out, okay, which section do I have to be vigilant? Do I have to kind of work across? So this is basically the kind of background in summary AI has given, right? So then based on that, if I need to kind of further build on it, if I need to further like even develop a training program, I can write a AI prompt basically asking, okay, can you give me a training plan or a slide deck for newcomers addressing the outcomes of the policy or the direction which has been given. And then it'll give you the slide deck that is required. So yeah, so I think that's, see, exactly that's what I've done over here. Can you develop a slide deck for training based on previous answer? And this is how it goes. So you can take this information and you can refine it to suit the purpose that you're kind of looking for. And it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. And we can constantly keep refining and fine tuning per se. Yep. So that's basically a little bit of heads up in terms of how you can use AI in this context. So happy to take any questions if you all may have, because it will be much more easy to give a more practical experience and sharing that rather than, sort of taking through the slide deck per se. Happy to answer any questions. Over to you, Throda.
Thank you, Maheshi. I hope I'm audible. So we did have a few questions coming in, but due to limitations of time, our team kind of jumped in and answered a few, which was eventually covered in your deck as well. But I think the curiosity in people brought the questions ahead. So it was kind of covered by our team. But we do have one more question, which we have got in, which is, how do you keep HR staff informed and trained on using AI prompts efficiently and effectively?
Yes. So baseline is basically you need to sit as a team, go through some of these tools and create that inquisitiveness, right? Is because as a team, because you will come across people with different age groups. Younger the team is, yes, most likely they are already, using these tools for their other areas of work. So, or even for their personal, sort of work. So they might be more familiar. But whereas if you have mid-age or maybe little, sort of higher in age kind of a team, which is whom you have to kind of deal with, might not be very familiar. But when you create the inquisitiveness, anybody is very very keen to kind of save time, right? I mean, who wants to sit down and spend time and sort of lengthy hours in terms of doing things? So if that is an easy way, everybody's interested. So that's number one. And then creating that inquisitiveness and interest. Secondly, is basically it's something that you need to keep trying. As I said at the very beginning, even I'm not a pro, I'm keep experimenting and trying to sort of see various ways to do it. In the same way, you need to kind of, you can predefine certain prompts and keep it ready so that, because take for an example, like a job description. I mean, this is something that you constantly do, but the type of job will vary time to time. So you can write certain prompts and keep it ready so that you only have to replace the designations per se, and it can kind of create that environment. Sort of support you in terms of training your team and to quickly onboard them.
Great. So thank you very much, Maheshi, first for your very phenomenal and deep dive presentation and also for answering our question. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up. Any final words of wisdom for AI curious HR heroes?
So even I'm, sort of in still, sort of diving into this, but one of the things I would like to share, I mean, it's surely it's something that every HR professional should try, because the world of opportunities and in terms of what it can do is amazing. And every day you keep learning something new and you have a wow moment. So, sometimes we get bored when we do our jobs on day-to-day basis, answering the same questions to different people, all that. So your life can get a little interesting if you keep trying this. So get out there, try it out with hypothetical information, not with real data initially, because until you are really sure about the tool, the platform that you're operating, because confidentiality is very important. There are a lot of free tools available for your testing purposes. So get out there. That's my advice. Please do get out there and try it out and automate your, mundane tasks and get connected with people. And that is something that AI can't replace, is your personal connection with people, right? So you will have more time to do that. You don't have to be sitting and doing letters and sort of all those tasks anymore if you can use this.
Thanks again, Maheshi. That sounded great for a final advice. So, to our wonderful audience, thank you once again for joining in. And don't forget to check out the resources under the People's HR website for even more HR and AI related goodness. So, People's HR is always here to help you navigate in the ever evolving world of work and HR. So, until next time, bye. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great day.
you.